sure we have a few more people coming. Well, let's get this show on the road. Welcome everyone to our very first virtual barrel tasting party. Great to see everyone. Oh, we've had such a great response to this. Over the 3 shows that we're having, next week we have the 2 Zinfandel and Rhone shows. We're going to have about 800 guests. So we're far and away bigger than we normally would have here at the winery. We have filled in the last few weeks about 3,000 of these little bottles. So we've been working really hard to get this wine to you, and I'm so glad that you have joined us. And I have to tell you, we're open finally again after the 3rd shutdown we've had today. And in fact, we're packed outside. I'm in the gold room here. Bob's been down in the Cellar Club all day. Bob, you've been pretty busy, haven't you, today?
Yes, we have. We've seen over 100 people today.
Yeah, and that's just down in the cellar. So I think we've had close to about 300 visitors. It feels so great. We can't wait to see all of you back. So today we have people all the way from Ketchikan, Alaska, all the way to Westerly, Rhode Island. I think I just counted, we have about 35 states represented. So, so glad that all of you could have joined us from across the country. And just before I introduce our panel of experts today, just a couple housekeeping items. One, so the best way to view the show today is to go to speaker view, and that is in the right-hand column of your screen, and just select speaker view. You should just see the 6 of us smiling faces, and then everybody else will be at the top. If you want to look at all couple hundred people, then you go to gallery view. You don't want to do that. Maybe once in a while you can do that. And then if you're on a mobile device, you might need to swipe to get to the speaker view. Then you might just see the person that's talking. But if you're on a computer or a large screen, that's really the best way to watch this. And also, we're going to try to do the best we can to answer your chats. And the best way to chat is directed to the V. Sattui Winery virtual tasting. And Allie's on the board today, so she'll be monitoring that. But you also can also chat direct, but I'm not sure I'm going to see all those. But so that's really the best way. So those are really the 2 housekeeping items. So now let me introduce our panel of experts. First and foremost, our Director of Winemaking, Brooks Painter, is with us today. Good to see you, Brooks. And
welcome.
And you know, just a quick bio of Brooks. He is starting, I think, his 16th vintage here with V. Sattui Winery, but he's had a 40+ year career in winemaking. He's been selected twice as the winemaker of the year in the Napa Valley here at V. Sattui. So we're so thrilled that he could join us today and give us his expert opinions. And then our other winemaker, Jason Moravec, is here. Jason, good to see you.
Tom.
And I know most of you have met Jason before. He's been on a lot of our Zooms, and he's been with us for about 5 years. 2 years ago, he was promoted to winemaker, graduated from UC Davis. He's made wine down under New Zealand. He was with Kim Crawford. He's been over at Patson Hall, but we're so happy to have him here at the winery, being a part of our team. And then, I'm so happy to have John Winkelhaus here today. Welcome, John. And here's another guy that I think is entering his 11th vintage here at V. Sattui, something like that. And this is his 2nd career. Also was a very successful executive. He was president of one of the largest, if not the largest, reseller of microcomputer parts and things like that, and ran a huge company, Ingram Micro, in Europe. And he was twice selected as Executive Businessman of the Year in Europe. So we get a lot of accolades here on this team. Great to have you here. Bob Cuozzo has been a part of our family here for the better part of a decade, and running our cellar club and such. And he's such a great guy. Also has usually some pretty good jokes to tell. But also he's had a couple of careers and also in acting in New York and also lead singer in a band, and he's just a great guy to be with. And then Marc Golick, our food and wine expert. And so good to see you, Marc. And just quickly about Marc, he, not only does he know a ton about wine, he's had a great culinary background, started with Mustard's Grill here in the Napa Valley with Cindy Paulson, has gone on to run restaurants in Calistoga, and also the famous Pinot Blanc that was here in town. So everything from French cuisine to grilling is all under Marc's talents. And so I think that's it for our panel of experts. And so today, we have a lot to talk about, so I don't want to take too long, but besides all of us, during harvest this year, we did some interviews with some of our top growers. So everybody from Chris Morazzoli and Randy Preston. We're going to hear from Joe Ramazzotti from our Cab Franc vineyard. And so and hopefully we'll have time to listen to David Behar, vineyard manager from our Mount Veeder vineyard. So I think we're going to have a lot of information to go over. And then just lastly about what we're having today. So today is our 2019 Vintage Cabernets. And for those of you that have been purchasing futures, you might have seen some of these wines earlier in 2020. And so we have re-released a few more cases of these because you've probably heard, because of the smoke and the fires, we lost the Cabernet crop from 2020, which is absolutely devastating for us. And so we know that we're anticipating some shortages down the road, and we want to make sure that you have the ability to make sure you have some great wine at some good prices. And this is an amazing vintage, which we're going to talk about in a minute with Brooks and Jason. So anyway, just so you know that we've made some of these cases available, but very small, many cases, 20, 30, 40 cases. So if you're interested in these as we taste them, certainly want to jump on them, and we'll talk a little bit later about how you go about ordering these. But just to jump right into it, my first question is for Bob. Bob, for those that have not purchased futures, how does the program work, and why do people want to purchase futures?
Well, in a nutshell, you taste out of the barrel, and if you like something, you purchase a case of it. You can't mix and match them. You have to get a case of that one particular thing, but you can buy cases of each thing if you'd like. And you pay half now and half when it's ready in the future. Now, because you're going to give us money and go home with nothing, we're going to give you a nice big discount on it. So the best way to buy our wines, if you're going to do it year after year, is to buy futures. You know you're going to get a great product, and you're going to get it at a much bigger discount this way. And so percentage-wise, not enough of you are buying futures. Those of you who have, you know how much money you've saved. Instead of paying $95, you may have paid only $60 for a bottle. And so that is the biggest savings there. Now, some of the other reasons that you might want to buy it is you can come back in the future and taste it out of the barrel as it's aging. And in 10 years, if you do purchase some, you can tell your friends, I knew this wine when it was just a baby. And so it's a lot of fun, but it's also the best way to get our wines at the best price available.
How long have we been doing this program for?
I believe we started in 1982, and we were the first ones in the Valley to offer it to folks. So we've been doing it quite some time, and it's a successful program.
Yeah, I know people just love buying futures, and just too, the fact that you can come back and taste this wine as winemakers do as it ages in the barrel is a great way to learn about wines. Well, Brooks, let's talk. My next question is for you. Let's talk about the 2019 vintage. And how would you describe this vintage, and how does it maybe compare to some of the prior vintages?
Well, there's an idea that California's weather is very predictable year after year, but as many of you who live here or have visited California know, our weather changes from year to year. And so 2019 was characterized by a very wet winter and early spring, torrential rains, even mudslides, flooding, and then we had some warm weather conditions around bloom and flowering, Many people are aware of this, but grapevines are self-pollinating. So there's no birds and the bees. They have both male and female flowers, and that makes them susceptible to inclement weather during the bloom and flowering period. So we had a little bit of heat wave, and it actually it was good because it knocked off some of the berries, made the clusters a little bit lighter than they might have been with all that water in the ground. We're always looking at the season post bloom and up until color and veraison, and it was pretty mild. We did have a little bit of heat close to harvest, but in general it was a cool season. Acids were a little bit higher than normal. Harvests were just slightly later than normal. I'm looking at one of the wines we're tasting, Cabernet Franc, harvested October 1. The last of the Cabernet Sauvignon was the 28th of October. So that range was almost 4 weeks for the Bordeaux red varietals. Cabernet is typically early, Malbec is next, and Merlot, and then the Cabernets from cooler climates, for example, down close to the bay, Mount Veeder is an example of a little cooler climate. They will follow towards the end of the season. We overall we had optimum conditions during harvest, and the grapes came in really superb condition.
Oh, that's great. Well, in terms of this particular vintage, do you think it's going to age well? I know that's a question that probably a lot of people want to know. If they do buy a case of these features, when do you expect these wines to really be at their optimum drinking?
Well, I like to say that we make our wines in a style that allows for early accessibility. So they're soft, they're round, the tannins are not aggressive. So even after a year or two in the bottle, they're going to be delicious. But they're also meant to age 10, 15, even 20 years. And so it's really up to you. You want to fill your cellar with a case or two, have a bottle a year every 6 months, and follow the development. That's what I find really interesting. But I think these are wines to lay down, but they are going to be very readily drinkable and accessible in the first couple of years.
That's great. Well, my next question is for Jason. And Jason, you work with these wines on a daily basis. You're on the floor in the cellar with these wines. We're used to tasting these young wines all the time. When our guests are sipping these wines, what should they be looking for, and how will they change over between now and perhaps the time that they pick up their futures a year from now?
That's a really good question, and it's important to realize that these wines aren't finished wines. What we're sending you are directly out of a barrel, and they aren't done yet, but they are really close compared to the last future barrel tasting that we did for when we did these 19s last year. These actually have evolved quite a bit, so they're a lot closer to the final blend than usual, but they're definitely not quite finished yet. Brooks and I are still going to be going through and making some final adjustments and tweaking them a little bit before they go into bottle. And these will be going into bottle in about 6 months. From there, we'll allow them to age. We'll keep assessing them and figure out when a good release time is for them. But they are younger. They're going to be a little bit more tannic. They're going to be a little bit richer in fruit and just a bigger wine. So they will mellow out and soften over time.
They taste pretty darn good. Well, look, we got a lot of wines to taste, so let's jump right into it. Well, I'd like to have John Winkelhaus, Wink, to introduce our very first wine. Hopefully everyone's got their wines poured. You have your tasting mats. I should have said that earlier, but I figured you're all pretty smart that you figured that out. I had a little bit of a problem getting these caps off until I figured I got to press down on them. But so go ahead, John. Tell us about the first wine. Why you?
All right, thanks, Tom. This is the Sattui Vineyard Cabernet, and it really, for me, it's a great honor to introduce one of the 3 Rutherford cabs that we produce. Furthermore, the Morosoli cab is one of 4 allocation wines in our portfolio, along with the Paradiso, the Dust Up, and the Van Gogh. And this is the only one of the allocation wines that's left for you to be able to purchase now in the futures program. So, and I know there's only 40 cases or so left of this, and the allocation program is for our Hall of Famers, the President's Club, and the Gold members. So I'll let Bob talk about this maybe a little bit later on, but now I want to get to the fun stuff. As I breathe in this wine, I get little aromas of earthiness, some lush fruit, perhaps a little bit of spice, maybe some dried herbs, and the best part.
Yeah, hopefully everyone's taking a good sip of this right now. It's so good.
It's, oh, wow. It's just red and black fruit. It's kind of medium bodied, supple, with a lingering finish. So I'm still tasting this wine. I'll be tasting it for a little while too. So, as Brooks was saying, the way they make this wine, it'll drink wonderfully in 2022, but will sell it extremely well for many years to come. This is a great picture because what makes this wine so special is the place, sense of place where the grapes are grown. So certainly Rutherford is world famous for producing great Cabernet, but more than that, the care of the ground of the vineyards by the Morosoli family and the men and women who work the farm and this land and take care of the vines year round. All farmers know, all vintners know that the best wines to produce are those that you really have to start in the vineyard. And this really is confirmed by the awards and the scores of the recent vintages. The 2018 barrel sample received a score of 92 to 95 points from Robert Parkner's Wine Advocate. That was from the barrel. So that's a good indication of how well these wines are made. And, just a couple of years ago, the 2014 was awarded 97 points in Wine of the Year at the Winemakers Challenge. And a year later, the 2015 was awarded 97 points in Wine of the Year at the Monterey International Wine Competition. So this is a fabulous wine. Congratulations, Brooks and Jason, for this. And I know pretty soon you're going to have a chance to hear from Chris Morosoli, and he's going to be much more capable of giving me a chance to see the vineyard and see some of that Rutherford dust that'll kick off his boot. Cheers.
Yeah. But thank you, John. Well, hey, before we go to Chris, let's just reach out to Marc on this. And Marc, what components stand out for you in this wine?
I'm sitting here, I'm on the first wine, I'm just already blown away by the setup that I have in front of me, but the Morosoli is standing out with that just typical Rutherford dust on the nose right away. You can just almost feel the silkiness. There's that dark truffly nature. Oh, and really deep dark cassis and dark cherry like notes. But the one thing that I'm also noticing just by smelling these, the 2019s, and especially showing up in this Morosoli, is that they're just so, the only word I can think for is racing. They are just jumping out of the glass. You can smell that there's just so much character development in this wine already, and I think this is going to develop into something cherished for not a lot of years to come.
Yeah, we're really excited about it. Well, just one last question before we get to the video with Chris Morosoli, and I'm going to direct this to Brooks. So this is your 15th year making this wine. Why is this wine so singular, so special?
Well, Gary Morosoli and now his son Chris, fourth generation grape growers here in Napa Valley. They know their ground better than anybody else. And it's, as Chris will mention, the soil characteristics. They have, they take a little bit of a unique approach to the irrigation regime, which Chris may mention. But they've been doing this for so long, and we've had such a long relationship. In fact, it just reminded, I just got reminded, Tom, I think you were introduced to this wine in 1993 when you visited another winery, and you and Dario tasted it and your eyes lit up and you said, we've got to go see this guy. So we've had a long history with Morosoli. My personal take is that they know what they're doing. They're experts. They know their soil. They know their vines, and we just have a great relationship.
Good.
Once it gets into the winery, of course, then it's their job is done. Now it's up to Jason and I and the winemaking team to do a little magic. And we've learned over the years. Certainly, the first couple of years I was working with these grapes, I had an opportunity to try a couple different things, a couple of different experiments, and find out how the grapes were going to react in the fermentation process, barrel aging. We do use a good slug of oak, usually about 60% plus. Some years almost 80% brand new French oak. So we're giving a lot of attention to these wines, trying to make them the best they possibly can.
Good. Well, here, let's get to the video. I think I'm excited to show this. Chris Morosoli. He's great. I think you'll like this. We filmed this last year.
Hey, welcome to Morosoli Vineyard. We're here standing in the middle of the vineyard here in Rutherford, just bordered between Niebaum and Manley Lane. My name is Chris Morosoli, fifth generation farmer, along with my dad, Gary. And what's special, I think, about the Morosoli Vineyard is kind of its location and also the history that we have. It's bordered here, like I said, between Niebaum and Manley Lane, up against the foothills of Mayacamas and the beautiful Mount St. John, which is right behind us. Fourth and fifth generations now farm Morosoli Vineyard, and it was originally started by my great-grandfather, Rocco Morosoli, and his family. He married Lodovina Morosoli in 1893, and then they started farming here on the ranch in 1902 when they had my great-grandfather Plinio Morosoli, and they lived in that small white house on the property, which was the only thing here on Niebaum Lane, and they really farmed it from 1902 until about 1910. It was originally part of the Doak Ranch, which was a very large swath all the way from Oakville, kind of all the way to Rutherford. So they purchased that part of the land and then continued to farm it really until present day. So from my great-grandfather to my grandfather, Phil, and then my dad, Gary, and now I'm here helping out as well. I don't know, Rodeo Drive, I prefer the Niebaum Lane of Napa Valley, but I have heard that. We do have some great neighbors. I mean, the history here, and especially in the west side of Rutherford, is really cool. We've got, Inglenook, which was here since 1879. You've got the Lopez Ranch, which Scarecrow comes from. You've got Phelps down the road. So we've got a good group of folks as neighbors. And everyone gets along pretty well too, so that's good. Well, everything that we do here at Morosoli Vineyard is done by hand in the vineyard, whether that be from pruning all the way through harvesting. So the dirt here at Morosoli Vineyard I think is really special. It's alluvial soils that come down off of the Mayacamas range. It's a little bit elevated over some of the other areas in Rutherford, and it's well drained. So that soil is light enough to where it allows water to drain quickly from it, and it also allows the vines to get roots down deep so that they can get to more groundwater. And then during the heat of the summer, they're a little bit more drought resistant. They can get to some water, but they also struggle a bit, and that's what helps make those complex flavors that we all love so much in our Cabernets. Andrei Chelychev once said it takes Rutherford dust to grow great Cabernet, and it is really just a metaphor, I think, for the terroir and the land that we have here in Rutherford.
Wow, what a great video. And Bob, why is this such, we know why it's a popular wine, because it's just so darn good. But Bob, I think Wing said something that, this wine is allocated. So how do folks go about getting this particular wine?
Well, I'd imagine they call us at this point. You can still come in and taste it. It's still here in the barrel. If you ask most of the folks here at Sattui, the people that work here, what their favorite wine is, 50% will say Morasoli, and 50% will say Preston probably. And they're both in Rutherford. And as John mentioned, that's probably the best place in the world to get some Cabernets is the Rutherford benchland.
Yeah.
So I would say call us because there are only about 40 cases left available as futures. But this is one of the best wines that we make.
Good. No, we'll go over the ordering stuff, and at the end. But also just to let folks know too, this is an allocated wine just for our top tier members. But we do have a path for those that are not top tier. If you do get to the $1,500 level, that would allow you to get a case, and I think it's a max of 2 cases per person on this. So anyway, well, good. Well, you mentioned the Rutherford cabs. But I think Montveeder is, I think for many of us, also one of our favorite wines. And I know someone that pours a lot of this up in the tower for a reserve tasting, and that's Marc. And Marc, why is this? I think it probably is your most favorite, but I don't know. I don't want to speak for you. What do you say?
Tom, it's a lot like trying to name your favorite child. It's tough, but since I've been here, Montveeder has always been top of my list, and anyone who knows me or has been up in here in the tower has been heavily influenced by this wine. And this upcoming vintage of 2019, I can't say enough about. It's everything that Montveeder has always been. It's that just rustic mountain berries. You can smell that mocha and spice minerality coming off of the wine. This to me has just always been the most exciting of all of our Cabernets, and the most fun also to use with wine and food pairings, the most versatile, and also the one that I love to claim the most is just my porch cab. So this vineyard of ours is so different from all the others. And for those of you at home who have all these wines poured and lined up, if you glance down here, not even our Malbec or Petite Verdot matches that dark inkiness that comes from our Montveeder cab. And I think it just speaks to the character of the wine being so rich and condensed, yet when it's on the palate, mountain wines are so much more bright and bright berried and brambly, but have the florals and spices that just aren't present in Valley Floor. And trust me, I love all the styles. I love all of them, but the mountain fruit and the characteristics coming from our Veeder vineyards stand alone in our lineup of single vineyard Cabernets.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. This wine to me is just so darn delicious. Well, look, we have a question from Ellen Barner, and hi, Ellen. And I know Brooks would love to answer this question for you. And she's asking Brooks, what is your pre-fermentation protocol? And do you cold soak, or do you perform some early maceration, or what are some of your secrets that you're willing to share? Mm-hmm.
Well, there are a lot of techniques that we use in these wines. First of all, we pick at night. And so it arrives at the winery at about 6 a.m. or even earlier, sometimes 3 or 4 a.m. after the harvest. And so it comes in very cool. And that's optimum temperature for cold soaking or pre-fermentation treatment. We will go ahead and destem it using some automatic sorting equipment. We do some cluster sorting depending on the condition of the grapes, but we are very careful to sort the optimum maturity berries away from any green berries or hard berries or raisins. And once it gets in the tank, it's already at 45, 50 Fahrenheit, which is one of the huge advantages of night harvest. So we'll do anywhere from a 2 to 3 day cold soak, pre-fermentation, maceration. The idea being that we are going to extract some of the intense color and polyphenols known as anthocyanins, and they are able to come out prior to alcoholic fermentation. So they will add a lot to the character of the wine. Once we're ready to start the fermentation, we'll begin allowing it to warm up. We do usually inoculate with yeast. We do some wild fermentations, but to answer your question, Ellen, the pre-fermentation cold soak is a key part of what we're trying to do.
Brooks, this wine, what's with the color? I fully understand being up there in the cooler climates, it's got to kind of have a thicker jacket. So a little bit thicker skins. Is that really the reason behind having such a dark inky colorization, or what's going on?
Well, Mark, that's a good correlation. I think in my observation and years of winemaking, the cooler the climate, and especially the afternoon heat, will intensify the pigmentation and the color. So our Mount Veeder vineyard is right on the southernmost border of Mount Veeder. You can literally look down on San Francisco Bay, and you can almost throw a rock at it. So it's definitely cooler than a lot of the rest of the valley, and that plays a huge role in the development of these pigments and the color development.
I just love that bit about this wine. Just honestly, and again, just to say it again, just looking down the lineup, this one really just comes out as the darkest, most inkiest thing that we have.
Well, on that map of Mount Veeder, the Appalachian map, there was a tiny little finger pointing down towards the bay. That's our Mount Veeder vineyard. It's the southernmost part of that appellation. And it's about 1,000 feet elevation too. It gets breezy in the afternoon. It never gets terribly hot. And so for mountain fruit, that's exactly what you want.
Thank you for answering that. Well, before we see the video with David, just want to have a quick question to Jason. You work with this wine. What are some of and maybe this is just tagging on the coattails of what Brooks has been talking about, but some of the site specifics that really set this wine apart from the valley floor fruit?
Mm-hmm. Right. So for this wine, we are at high elevation. This is wines with, great intensity. And I think kind of chipping in on kind of what Mark was asking about is of how do you get that color, but also how do you get that intensity of the fruit and everything that's involved in going on with this wine. And one thing with Mount Veeder is our yields are extremely low. When you compare it across all of our other vineyard blocks, the yields are minuscule. They're so tiny. And so that also increases the intensity and the color, because you have more skin to juice ratio. And so you're just pulling out all of those great things out of the skins. And because there's less of the juice for it to pull out and more of those skins, more of those flavors, more of all that great stuff, I think that's really what makes Mount Veeder really pull apart from all the other appellations. And like Mark, Mount Veeder is definitely one of my favorite, and it's true to my heart wherever I taste it. Every time I can pick it out of a lineup, you give it a smell. It has those complexities that you're looking for. It has the fruit. It just has everything. And so this is definitely one to get as a future.
Well, and that's a good segue to seeing this video with David, because what sets this vineyard apart, it's ours. This is our estate, and so we control it from vine to bottle. And I'm excited to share this video with David Behar. Has been a part of our team now for a quarter of a century or longer. And what a great guy. And he's so much is a part of this particular wine. And it's, and so hopefully that comes on shortly. And let's hear from David Behar. Well, and then here he is.
The season has been really a lot challenging for us, especially here in my department. Is the lack of water, and then also the COVID-19 that we had, and then also the fires. It's a big challenge for everybody. It was sad from the beginning, seeing all the work that we do, thinking they might get burned or it's going to go to waste or something. But I think that affects on the way that the farming way to do it, we change a little bit. It's teamwork. I'm not department. We harvest and we baby this vine.
Gosh, so with Sattui now, this is my fifth harvest here, and we always say that no harvest is the same, but this is always above and beyond. It seems like every year it just gets crazier and crazier. We didn't have any fruit coming across our crush pad for a good 4 days there, which feels really weird in the middle of harvest. Harvest is normally the busiest time for us, and we're working crazy hours every single day. And to put a hold on it for 4 days, it feels very odd. So now it feels really good to get things going again, get back out there in the fields and bring in some more fruit.
Dealing with our growers and trying to assess the character and quality of their grapes and making picking decisions, that's been probably the biggest challenge for me. Once the grapes are here at the winery, we've already made those decisions, but there's a lot of heartbreaking stories. So that for me personally has been really difficult. But we have developed these relationships with not only our great staff, but grape growers going back for 30 plus years. We've been buying these grapes from outside growers like Preston and Moravec. We've had some difficult conversations trying to deal with evaluating the quality of the grapes and what we're going to do, what's best for them, what's best for us. We try to make it a win-win as much as possible because we have these fabulous business relationships. So that really speaks to the dedication and the passion that we have as a team. And we're definitely committed to doing the right thing at the right time.
This is nature. We can't change things. You can't predict it's going to be hot or cold tomorrow. But we have to change with nature. Napa Valley is my home. I'll be here. It doesn't matter how many or how I change. I'll be here. And for Sattui, has been my home for 27 years. I'll be here. To me, nothing's going to change. These fires that we had, COVID-19, it's just a stepstone that we have in our lives. I'll be here babying these vines, and that's it. Be sure that it's not going to catch on fire. Be sure that the weather's going to be okay. Be sure that I got the right products to put in, nutrient-wise and water. But overall, nothing changed. The weather changed. Our lives continue going. Napa Valley is great. I won't change that for anything.
Well, if you all want to know why we make great wines, it's because of people like David Behar and his soul and his hard work. As I said, quarter of a century makes all the difference. And we do have one quick question, how does this wine age? And we know here that it does age well. Right now, I think last time I had our 2005, it was just absolutely delicious. 2006, it gives you some idea. And I think just going back to what Brooks said, these wines we make so you can enjoy them when they're relatively young, but they have the stuffing to really age. So anyway, well, let's get going because we got still a lot of wines. And so I think the next wine we need to go to is our Preston Vineyard Cap. So that's our third wine. And, Bob, I think you said, this is another really popular wine down in the cellar. And I know you pour a lot of it. Why do people love Preston so much?
So this is my favorite. I like to say it's smooth as a baby's bottom, but it smells a lot nicer. Now, this is probably the longest contract, if correct me, but I believe Dario and Dick Preston shook hands back in 1975 or 6. And we actually have one bottle of 1977 left in the gold room. But
Behind me here.
it's a fabulous wine. The reason I like it so much, it's probably one of the smoothest of the Cabernets. And at my advanced age, I don't want to wait 5 or 10 years because I may not be here to enjoy it. So that's one of the reasons is my favorite, but it's loaded with black cherry flavor. I just find it, smooth as silk. And so that's my particular favorite. I do love the others just as much, but when you have to lean toward one, that's my favorite. So.
Well, John, I know this is a favorite of yours as well. Why don't you tell us a little bit of, at least from your vantage point, about this wine?
Well, Bob touched on the history a little bit, and Dick Preston did come and see Dario when he was getting ready for his second vintage. So 1975 was the first vintage of the resurrected Sattui Winery here in the Napa Valley. And as the story goes, in the spring of '76, just after reopening the winery, Dick Preston walked in and offered to sell Dario his grapes. And Dario at the time knew that Rutherford was a very good place to grow grapes and jumped at the chance to purchase these, the Preston Vineyard grapes. And of course, today is recognized as one of the very best areas to produce Cabernet Sauvignon in the United States. So I guess, when Bob loves the wine, I think it's just the history of not only of the wine, but all the competitions it's been in and the recognition it's received. So it's continued to receive high scores and multiple gold medals. In fact, I think in 1992, and Tom, you were here, I think it was named the best wine in California at the California State Fair, if I recall correctly. And, you still think of, Tom, I think many of our members still think of the Preston Cabernet as a cult wine. So it's got that following, which is what a cult is. And I also know that the Preston Cab through all these years still holds the title of the most awarded wines from Sattui. But it's just a fabulous wine.
Yeah.
Consistency. That's the word I was looking for before. Consistency every year, in and out. Yep. It's one of the best.
Absolutely. It was 1982. It was, I think, the very first year our wines were submitted for any kind of review or competition. And is the Los Angeles County Fair. We had the #1 Cabernet Sauvignon. And that was a watershed year for us. Well, hey, Jason, I have a question. And I think it was Ken Storer that asked this. And how would this wine change in the next 6 to 8 months? So once we, between now and once we get it in the bottle.
Yeah, so kind of like what I said before, these wines aren't quite finished. So we're still working on the blends. Brooks and I, over the next couple of months, we're going to be bringing in samples of each of these lots, and we still have a little bit of wiggle room. Most of these are all single vineyard. So they're going to be 95% at least of that vineyard. That gives us a little bit of ability to make minor tweaks. But I would say this wine is very close to where it should be. I wouldn't imagine it changing very much. So if you're really enjoying this in the glass and really like it, I would definitely spring for it. And then I think that this is already soft, but it will just become a little bit softer. I think that the oak will integrate a little bit more. Right now, the oak, I think, is kind of sitting a little bit on top, it's a little separate from the fruit. Once those combine together, that's what it's going to taste like once it's released.
I just saw a chat. Someone's opening a 2013 for Preston to dinner tonight. Good for them. Wish I was there. Well, look, let's hear, this is going to just segue from what Wink was talking about. Let's hear from Randy Preston and Mike Nunez, the vineyard manager, and get a little sense of history about Preston Vineyard.
So my dad bought the property in 1969, and we moved up. Well, we started coming up in 71, and when we bought the place, it was all walnut trees, so it was a walnut orchard. It was one of the last few vineyards out on the valley floor where it had not been converted to a vineyard. So this was one of the last ones out there. My dad had been looking for it. He for something where he could go to. He was originally a Kansas farm boy, got caught in the Depression, whole family packed up, moved out to Los Angeles and to California, and he got a job making airplanes. But he'd always kind of like had this idea in the back of his mind that maybe it was from flying and going to different places and things of that nature. But he really wanted to have a vineyard, and he liked Cabernet.
For Preston Vineyard, it's really the strict viticultural protocols. We have very strict fruit thinning protocols. Our clones here are clone 7, clone 47, and clone 191. And although the vines are capable of producing 2 clusters per shoot, we take it one step above and drop it to 1 cluster per shoot. It hurts yield, but here at Preston, it's all about quality, not quantity. That's really what delivers the best product to us. Rutherford Dust, when you're enjoying a great glass of Rutherford Cabernet, you can taste those earthy components in the wine. Is what makes the wine in Rutherford phenomenal. But you're drinking that Rutherford Dust, and that's really what it's all about. It really also comes with the balance of viticultural techniques. You want to have the right rootstock that is appropriate for the soil. Here we have bale loam. The climate and the soil is really what makes the fine wine. It gets the earthy character from the soil, which influences the quality, the character, and the weather influences the quality. We really have the hot days that ripen the fruit and the cool nights that give the acids that are needed.
I remember Dario and my dad, from the very early years, talking with one another and things of that nature. I do love the fact that we have a vineyard here in the Napa Valley, but not just in the Napa Valley, but in the Rutherford Dust Society area. And so there's also kind of a feeling that you need to make sure that you do it right and that you keep doing it right and you don't mess it up.
Well, Marc, I know this is another favorite wine of yours. What are some of your favorite food pairings with Preston Cab?
Preston is so amazing because it has that explosive, bright Bing cherry cola like flavor. And to me, it can be a total cop out to answer, it doesn't need anything. This is like a porch cab to me. It is so soft. And like Bob said, it's so smooth. It's smooth as a baby's bottom. And it just really can be a standalone wine. But as a Cabernet, being that Rutherford dustiness, having those caramel truffly natures in the background pairs so well with foods that we would kind of naturally make this time of year, being those deep, dark stews, the roasts. It's going to be a protein or a fat or a salt loving wine. And as far as all of our Cabernets go, that's going to be the real show. That's what's going to set them off the best.
Yeah, thank you, Marc. Well, yeah, I don't know. It's a simple descriptor, but I like to just say this wine is just flat out delicious. And these wines, I'm just watching some of the chats. Some people are, I think Jerry Wells is saying, what do we drink tonight? Is it the 11 Preston or 13 Preston? So many choices, so many decisions. And isn't it great? And that's what's wonderful about futures, because you get these cases and you set them aside and you drink a couple bottles over the decades, and then you really get to live with this wine over a period of time. And you can say you had it when it was a baby, and you can have it when it's 20 or 30 years old. Some people, Dale and Debbie, are talking about the 1980 Preston is the first time they had it. So all these stories are so spectacular. Well, look, there's another Cabernet that we need to taste here tonight. And this is another one dear to us, because this is our estate cab. It's right here at the winery. It's made some damn good wines too. And I'd like to have Jason introduce this wine and tell us a little bit about it.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, so we've tasted 3 other wines here. This is the 4th, and these are all of our top premier tier cabs. two of which are estate. The first one that we tasted that's estate was the Mount Veeder, and this is the second one. So this is the BORDEAUX 2019 future tasting. And this wine, if you're feeling like the other ones were a little bit soft or a little bit too light in a way, I'd say this one has a lot more strength, has a lot more tannin, has a lot more body, and it has a little bit more of that aggressive tannins that you would taste. They should mellow out over time, but it's, you know, something that pulls this vineyard apart from the rest is really that it's attached to the winery. It's close to us all the time. We're able to walk these grounds the most. Brooks and I, we actually walk through this area almost every day. So we keep a really close eye on these vines. This vineyard is organically farmed. It's organically farmed and sustainably farmed. And so these vines are well looked after. Another thing, like I was saying with the other the other vineyards, we're purchasing Cabernet from these growers. And so we have, you know, it has to be 95% from that estate or that vineyard. Whereas here, for us to call this Cabernet Sauvignon, we can actually blend in other varieties because we have other varieties that are grown in Vittorio's vineyards. So that's what makes this wine a little bit more unique. Specifically, we often blend a little bit of the Petite Verdot from our Vittorio's vineyard into this. It's still 85% or more Cabernet from the Vittorio's vineyard, so it's still Cab dominant. But I think that Petite Verdot really builds that body and makes it more of a power wine. And so if that's something that you're looking for, this is the wine for you. Personally, I think that this is the wine that would age the longest because of that, because of those strong tannins. If you're looking to lay this wine down for 10, 15 years, I think that this wine will really hold up to time and taste amazing even after that long.
Great. Well, thank you, Jason. And just to maybe tag on what you're talking about, organic farming, I believe this is our 11th or 12th year that we've been certified organic at Vittorio's. And Brooks, I'd like to ask you this question. You know, what effect does organic farming have on what we're tasting? Does it make a difference? Because it costs us a lot more to farm that way, about 30 to 40% more. You know, there's a lot of shovel work happening in that vineyard for chopping down those weeds as opposed to doing anything else.
Well, that's true, Tom. The weed control is probably the biggest challenge. We have not used any herbicides on this property for, as you said, about 11, 12 years. And so we have mechanical weeding ability, but oftentimes late season, it just gets down to pulling out a shovel and going out there and cutting all the weeds down. I like to think that we're doing our part for the world at large. Our neighbors aren't exposed to some of these chemicals that you know, are used in conventional farming. In terms of the wine quality itself, I think there is an impact. It's hard to measure. Jason mentioned the Petite Verdot. We are able to blend in a little bit of a different variety, 3 to 7% in many years. So that kind of sets this particular wine apart with our use of the Petite Verdot in the vineyard as well. But I know that when I go out to the vineyard, and I know that we're using very soft farming techniques. We're doing everything we can to do right by the environment and the critters and our neighbors. It just gives me a really warm feeling that we're doing our best. And what impact that has on the wine is hard to measure, but I know it has an impact.
Well, it's just my impression, because I've been, you know, drinking this wine since the day we bought the vineyard. We purchased the vineyard back in 1985, and we've made for those that have been around a long time buying our wines, they remember Suzanne's Vineyard, and it's now become Vittorio's. And so I'm sure a lot of you that are watching know this wine. All I know is this, that in the last decade or so, this wine it's been some of the best it's ever been. And so I think that's the only thing that I can look to, is that what are we doing differently? Well, we're farming organically, and again, we're very, very proud of that. Well, anyway, so let's get to our next wine, and that is Cabernet Franc. And who is going to introduce this wine? I think Brooks, maybe just before we jump into this, maybe talk a little bit about what is Cab Franc, and how would you describe this wine?
Well, Cabernet Franc is a close relative of Cabernet Sauvignon, and in fact, it's considered the parental cross with Sauvignon Blanc. So Sauvignon Blanc and Cabernet Franc got together out in some vineyard and created Cabernet Sauvignon through a cross. And the Vineyards, the grape growers, winemakers at the time in Bordeaux, estimated a couple of hundred years ago, they saw that this was a very different vine or different shoot. They started collecting them and propagating them. And so it has characteristics of that relate a lot to Cabernet Sauvignon. It tends to be not quite as intense, it doesn't have the, in most cases, it doesn't have the same pigmentation unless it's grown in the absolutely perfect condition. And that by that I mean basically rock, because it is fairly vigorous. As a parent of Cabernet, Cabernet can grow vigorously as well. Cabernet Franc is even more so. But what I would like to explain and describe is the aromatic character of Cabernet Franc. It is more floral, more spicy. When we use it as a blender, and we're adding it to other varieties like Cabernet Sauvignon or Merlot, it will bring in a really different component to the nose of the wine. And then the impact on the palate is less so, but in the nose, it's more spice, more cinnamon, more floral, and it adds adds a lot of complexity. Which is why I love this grape.
There's a ton of florals going on in this, Brooks. There's rose petals and spice and lilacs. That's amazingly floral.
It's a perfect wine for Valentine's Day.
That's I think its most unique characteristic, but it does need to be grown in the right soil. And in fact, we're planting Cabernet Franc here at Vittorio's for the first time this year. So within a few years, we'll have our own Cabernet Franc, Vittorio's Vineyard Cabernet Franc. We're really looking forward to that.
Well, until we get to our own Cab Franc, and everything in making wine and growing grapes takes a while. So even though we're planting it this year, by the time that we get to enjoy it, it's about 7 years from now. But in the meantime, we have an amazing grower, Joe Ramizotti. You probably know his name from our Ramizotti Zinfandel. Let's hear from him, because he farms this vineyard for us up in the Alexander Valley.
We're just about a mile north of Geyserville in beautiful northern Alexander Valley. And this vineyard is the Cab Franc. And I put this in 1997. It's a good story. The owner, Ray Pagoni, was my school bus driver from when I came here from Italy all the way to through high school. And Ray was one of the last farmers who tried to farm prunes in this 18-acre parcel. And he stuck it out, and he finally said, I've had it. And he leased it to me back in '97. And I took out this beautiful old prune orchard and put in this beautiful Cab Franc. And it's been well received. I think it likes this soil. The soil is a beautiful, like 10, 12 feet of this beautiful topsoil with then gravel underneath, because this was all a river bar at one time. The Russian River went right through here. So we got gravel underneath, well drained, but good topsoil to hold these vines, and they're still rich and beautiful. These are 23 years old now, and they're still gorgeous and producing very well. Well, in 97, Cab Franc was there wasn't much planted in Alexander Valley. So I actually put in 6 acres of Cabernet, 6 acres of Cab Franc, and 6 acres of Syrah. I did well with 2, the Cabernet and Cab Franc. The Syrah, you can't give it away. We go up north just about 7 to 10 miles, we'll get 10 degrees hotter in the Cloverdale area. That's still upper Alexander Valley, but it's a totally different situation than here. Very hot, still weather, no wind, and much hotter. So I feel like I've got seems like the Geyserville's a chosen little spot here. It doesn't get too hot, but not too cold in the wintertime or the springtime. And then south of me, we get into a more of the open area like the lower Alexander Valley through the Russian River. It opens up even more, all the way from the Santa Rosa Plains to the mountains of the Mayacalas. We're just nestled in between these 2 little mountain ranges right here, and for me, it's been a special spot. Well, what I learned is that if I can avoid it without cultivation, I don't cultivate anymore. So what I've done with this vineyard is I put in, it's called a dryland pasture mix. And it goes dry in the summer, but the first rains and this beautiful grass comes right up every year. So the least I'm in there with tractors and turning the soil, I think the better is to farm. A non-irrigated vineyard, you have to cultivate because you don't want any competition from weeds and grasses. But since I have a beautiful drip system here, I'm able to control the water to these vines and no competition from the grass. So as you notice, I have no frost protection. And so most areas, you better have some kind of frost protection, because one thing about this valley is that no matter, even in the spring when it could be dangerous for frost, there's always a breeze coming through here. It seems like just a natural breeze, and I can feel it now, and it's just constant. And it seems to help prevent, I get no mildew, it just seems like to be just a natural place to have vineyards.
You know, when we filmed that video with Joe, what a great, great guy. It was 100 degrees, and he's really, what he said was true. When we got there to film the Cab Franc section, we were actually at Ramiz, and then we were over at Schoolhouse. We got there, you could really feel that cool breeze. And Ellen Barner has another question, and maybe Brooks, you can answer this. And I think Joe kind of touched on it. She wants to know perhaps what are some of the other sustainable practices that we're doing in our vineyards, beyond just the organic farming, but we know we take a very sustainable approach to farming.
Well, the philosophy is integrates multiple concepts. A lack of tillage, and you just heard Joe talk about tilling the soil versus using appropriate seed mix, summer dormant. And so I think that we're finding that the less we do with the soil, there's less erosion, there's a more beneficial conditions for insects, that predatory insects that can help us control problem insects in the vineyard. And so those are the practices that we're all moving towards, these sustainable, if not outright organic programs that we're doing. And as we learn more about how to manage the vigor of the vine, because it's all about balance. We're looking for a certain amount of crop, but we don't want to overcrop or undercrop. We don't want to grow too many leaves or not enough leaves. So this concept of a balanced viticulture program is really, really important. So at multiple times during the year, we go out and we'll assess shoot length, number of leaves, vigor. Are the vines showing stress, or do we need to cut back on the water? And those are the things that we're practicing more and more these days.
Well, it's certainly making a difference. And, sometimes Cab Franc can be really, to me, herbaceous, kind of herby, but Jason and Brooks, you do such a great job, and Joe, taming that down. And I think in the American wine competition, it was also rated the top Cab Franc. And Brian Russell just asked, will we continue to source Cab Franc from Ramiz? Well, I know Joe would like us to continue buying his grapes, and we make such a nice wine from it. And yeah, I would hope so. Just like we have multiple Cabernets, it'd sure be fun to maybe come out and do a couple of different vineyard designated Cab Francs, because it really does deserve its day, because it is an amazing wine. And just one last question, I'd like to direct this to Bob. And we talked about the popularity of Cab Franc, and I remember we had a Rosenbrand Cab Franc here a number of years ago. Maybe some of you might remember that, but it's almost like there's a cult following for Cab Franc. Would you say that's true, Bob?
Yes, this is a wine I think people either love it or they are turned off by it. I describe it as a female Cabernet. It's kind of perfumey and soft in all the right places. If you're looking for a Cab, but not as strong as a Cab, tannin-wise, then this would be something to have. And I think it would be great with like a filet mignon wrapped in bacon or something along those lines. But yes, this is a wine that I love to pour it to people, explain it to them where it came from, and it's usually well received.
Yeah, well, it's, I know, a really popular wine here. Well, look, let's jump to our next wine. And there's a fellow in his wine cellar right now, Wink. I know this is a really popular wine of yours. You're always wanting to send it with the wine club, and I'm always telling you, we only make a few hundred cases of this. So why don't you tell us about your favorite wine here?
Yeah, yep. This is one of my favorite wines, Tom, and I love when we're able to open it to share with our members, which doesn't happen very often. Usually when you're on vacation, it might get opened a little bit more. The grapes in this bottle actually are grown in two of our estate vineyards, the Carsey Vineyard near Yountville and the Hibbert Ranch in the Carneros. You know what? This is just a food-friendly wine. It pairs really well with most meals versus maybe Cabernet that has perhaps a little more limited pairings. Mark, what do you think about that?
No, I'm right on board, but Malbec for me, and especially ours, just like everything else we do, is so rich and fruit driven, but this has that deeper, darker, earthy spice that I think people are looking for with Malbec. And so I look at ours as a big protein wine.
Yep.
This is where's my pepper crusted New York steak?
Yeah. And that works really well, Mark. You're absolutely right. But I think for me, it's maybe a little lighter style than Cabernets can be. And therefore able to pair with a lot more of your meals that are available as well. Now, Argentina is very well known for its Malbecs, and I think we compare very favorably with the Malbec that we produce here as well. So it's just a great wine, and as I look at it, it's got kind of that deep purple color in it as well, Mark. And wow, it's just a beautiful, beautiful wine, and the nose of it just it really entices you to have a sip of it, and maybe more than one.
There's a big time blueberry muffin on the nose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely fabulous. So, this is a wine that I think you can drink easily now. It will cellar pretty well, and it's a great food wine as well. So, cheers.
Yeah, Jason. This is we work with this wine in the cellar. You've made it into 100% varietal. You will also see this wine appear in a Paradiso. It also appears in small percentages in some of our other Bordeaux wines. So tell us a little bit about, how do you take a variety like Malbec that can add to a blend, but also can stand on its own? I just think that's kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point, Tom. Malbec is unique in that traditionally it is found in a Bordeaux blend. So it's one of the 5 Bordeaux varietals. It's not seen on its own too often, but I think that we are able to really pull a really great wine out of a pure variety Malbec. I mean, as you can smell this and taste it, it really showcases what Malbec brings to the table when you're using it as a Bordeaux blender. If you take a cab that is a little bit richer in tannins, a little bit bigger body, and you blend it with something like Malbec, you're really going to soften it. I like to call it, this is the soul of the Bordeaux blend. This is the smooth jazz. It kind of chills everything out. And it also brings another fruit component where this has a little bit more of that blueberry muffin, like you said, or kind of more of a plum, really dark fruit. And so by bringing that fruit component along with softening that wine, that's what it does in a Bordeaux blend. But here you get to taste it on its own. So it's going to be very soft and very smooth and very beautiful plum, jam, fruits on it. So I think that's really how it can really relate to both the Bordeaux blend and on its own.
Well, Wink, this is your wine. How would you sum this up?
Well, one, I love it. Number one. Number two, it's very limited availability right now as a futures. I think we only have 21 cases available. And for $32 per bottle per case as a future, it's a great value. And I want to remind people, we don't have, Tom, do we have a 2020 varietal available?
No.
So, we're currently selling the perfectly aged 2018 vintage, and it'll be sold out by the end of the year. So this is a great time to buy this wine at a great price and a great value. It really is one of my favorite wines. I just cheers to all of them out there, and great purple colors as well.
It's a delicious wine. Well, look, we're about ready to hit up our last wine here. And as I like to say, there's nothing petite about Petite Verdot. This is a wine that stains your lips and your teeth. And this is another wine that it's amazing to me that when we blend it, we sometimes add 1 or 2%. And Jason or Brooks, you can talk to this, that it might only be a couple percent of the blend because it just really adds so much with such a small percentage. But then how in the world can we then make 100% varietal out of this wine that in some cases in a blend, we don't want more than 1 or 2%. I just always have a hard time getting around that, but yet the wine is just so delicious as a standalone.
Well, Tom, I'll take a stab at that. Petite Verdot is a very powerful grape and powerful wine. And so you're absolutely right. As little as 0.5% to 3% can dramatically change a red wine character. So we're always very cautious, but we love what it does at that low level. At the same time, it is a standalone wine and it's unique. And we're one of the few wineries here in Napa Valley that bottles a varietal Petite Verdot. So if you many of you have had this before, but if you haven't tried our Petite Verdot, you definitely should. It's one of the 5 Bordeaux varieties that Jason was mentioning earlier, but it really has very little familial relationship with the other ones. The clusters are small, almost like Pinot Noir, hence the name Petite. And it doesn't look like Cabernet, Merlot, Malbec, or anything else grown in Bordeaux, but it is a powerful blender and it's really fun to work with. One of the interesting characteristics of this is it's very prolific, and most grape varieties will have 1 or 2 clusters per shoot. It's not unusual for Petite Verdot to throw up to 4 clusters per shoot. So when we're thinning in the vineyard, I have the crew go through and say, okay, take the third and the fourth cluster off. And then I go out and I observe what they're doing. No, you're not taking enough off. I said the third or fourth and maybe even the second cluster off. So it takes a lot of thinning, a lot of extra work to make a superb Petite Verdot. It's very unique in that regard. And we're very proud of the Petite Verdot. It is absolutely dark as ink. It's often described as having a tar or pencil lead character. It's really very different than most other red varieties. But when used at a percent or two in a blend, it really can blossom and add a lot of complexity.
Brooks, I've only had a handful of pure Petite Verdots here from the valley, and normally it's like getting over the head with a, tannic hammer. How is it that ours is still kept so fruit driven? I don't understand.
Well, the way that we manage the fruit in the fermentation through temperature, pump overs, extraction. We usually finish the fermentation where we'll cool things down, slow the extraction down. We're very conscious of the amount of extraction of tannins, which can be quite overblown with this variety. And so we're always trying to anticipate, okay, we're almost there. Should we press it tomorrow or give it another day? And so we're always a little tentative about over extracting. And I think that's the key with this variety.
Hey Brooks, where does this Petite Verdot grow?
This is Vittorio's Vineyard Petite Verdot here at the winery. I guess I should have mentioned that. So it is an estate Petite Verdot. And I mentioned earlier, we're going to be planting some Cabernet Franc. We'll be replanting this as well this spring with the idea that 5 to 6 years, the old vines are ready to come out and we'll have a new round of Petite Verdot in the vineyard.
And I think this wine also completes the loop with our Vittorio's Cab. When we were saying we'd have 3 to 7% Petite Verdot in that cab, this is what we're talking about. So you can see how much this would change that wine.
Yeah, you can definitely taste the complexity in the wine.
And it's just absolutely dark and black.
Jason,
Great wine.
yeah, thank
Great
you.
wine.
Lindsay's asking Jason, how will this wine change as it ages? And we've talked a lot about aging Cabernets, but what about aging Petite Verdots?
Well, I think Petite Verdot has the potential just as much as the cabs that we've been tasting tonight, just because it is such a big wine, such a heavy body, that it can hold up to the test of time. And it's really a fun one to see how it ages. I mean, over time, as wines age, you'll see the fruit kind of come down a little bit in intensity, but also the tannins will soften. So you go from these little tiny tannin molecules to much larger ones, and they become much softer on the palate. And I think that this wine can definitely age and enjoy over 10, 15, 20 years.
Well, I think this wine also, if I could add to Jason's comments, as a young red wine, you should try decanning this, giving it a little air and letting it open up for a half hour before you pour it. It will benefit, and that incredible fruit forward note that Marc was referring to, softening the tannins, I think it will benefit from a little air once you open that bottle of wine.
Well, and then just one last question here for Bob, and we talked a little bit about cult followings for wines, and I think Cab Franc is there. Would you say the same is true for Petite Verdot, Bob?
Yes, I would. The uniqueness of this wine is what makes it. It's big, it's bold, it's powerful, it's dark. And so this is the one where people will ask me, what do you have, in the way of tannins? Oh, I got a nice Petite Verdot for you. And they just love this wine, but it is very unique, as you have all said. And so this is another one where, You know, there's a certain amount of people that really love this wine.
Good. Well, we have one last question. This is from Lauren Dean asking Jason, what kind of tweaks have happened before bottling? You know, I mean, that's, I don't know if we should disclose that or not.
That's the secret. I was actually just about to type that, but thank you for asking it. Yeah, so these tweaks that we're talking about, we have the ability to, what you're tasting right now is probably like 95% of what the wine is. We've already blended it. We're really close to where we want it to be, but we leave a little bit of wiggle room for the very end for us to add like a little bit more Petite Verdot or you know, adjust to a different vineyard or blend in another wine. And so we do make these minor changes, but really what you're tasting right now is what it's going to taste like. Our minor changes are so minor that most people won't even taste the changes, but that's what we're talking about when we're saying these little tweaks at the very end, which we often do after we rack it out. We want to really assess, we're tasting these wines in barrel, but then after we rack it out, we want to taste it as a group all together as one wine. And then we can make minor changes based on what we're tasting from there.
Hey, Jason, please tell the audience what racking it out means.
Oh, so all these wines are aged in barrel. And so most of the life of this wine at the winery is sitting in an oak barrel, which a lot of these wines are in oak barrel for 18 months, which is a really long time. And then at the very end of their aging in oak, what we do is we rack it out. So we take a racking wand, which is connected to a pump, and we are able to siphon it in a way, I guess, pull the wine out of the barrel and put it into a tank. And that's where we start the blending process, where Brooks and I are kind of tasting before we rack it out, after we rack it out, and we're kind of crafting the wines at that point.
Thank you.
You know, we're
Another tweak, Tom, if I could just add.
Sure.
Another tweak, we use too many barrels, too many different coopers, and I drive everyone insane every year with all the different selections of oak that we use. So another tweak that we might do before we rack out is look at the profile of each of the coopers and each of the oaks. And we might say, okay, we want a little bit more of this type of oak or that type of oak. So it's always a process of refining the quality of the wine through any means. It might be use of oak, it might be blending, the timing of pumping it out. Sometimes we delay the bottling, for example. So all these things will play a role, and that's the beauty of winemaking. It's really the craft and the artisan aspect of winemaking.
Well, I'm just watching all these chats, and I wish I could mention all of them, but you know what they're really saying is congratulations to an amazing team of grape growers and winemakers. You know, a lot of people are saying all these wines. I think Jim Majority said all these wines are fantastic, and I just, as I go through them, and you know, if you drink all of what we sent you, this is well over a bottle of wine. So I'm starting to feel it right now. But it's what a great job. Well, you know, we made it. We made all 7 wines. I was a little bit nervous so we could get through it in an hour and a half. So before we summarize everything, Marc, why don't you take it home a little bit and let people know how people can order these wines.
Tom, you know, if anybody's fallen in love with any of this stuff tonight, I was just sitting here looking over some of the pricing, and I just sent out a text to everybody. It's amazing. If you fell in love with a particular one that I did tonight, which would have been the Mount Veeder, just an example, you'd be only paying $34 a bottle for that tonight, which means you're out the door at $408 per case. And trust me, in a couple of years, you've forgotten about that half of the money. So it's like, you know, free wine. And if anybody needs to fall in love with to purchase any of these wines tonight, the best thing you can do, please call your favorite rep, call us, email us. We are here to accept any of these purchases. And I believe, Tom, correct me if I'm not right, I think this is going to go on for about another week.
That's correct. So, this is just the first of 3 virtual tastings. So next Friday and next Saturday, we have rounds 2 and 3. So when you thought you've had just too much fun, we're going to have some more fun. And you're right. People can call their reps, or they can fax in or email in the order form. You can just fill it out, put your information on it.
Fill it out, put it in the snail mail. We don't care.
Yeah, you can scan it, email it to us, fax it to us. So, well, any last thoughts before we summarize this thing? Congratulations to all you guys.
Hey, Tom, maybe you want to mention the fact of the 2019 may be the last vintage for many of the wines we featured tonight.
Well,
until the 2021 vintage.
Until 2021, that's right.
Yeah, we're skipping a vintage, and not all of vintages, because you're going to taste next week. We're going to taste the 2020 Zins, which are spectacular. We're going to hear again from the Joel Hirsch, the Pilgrim Vineyard. We're going to talk again to Joe Ramiz. So we definitely got some great Zins. I know everyone is excited to hear from them. And just speaking to that, as watching these videos, and I don't know, Brooks, have you seen the videos before that we posted tonight? Or was that the first time?
Oh, no, I think I've seen all of them so far. Yeah.
But I think what it does, it gives you a glimpse of how special this is for us, the relationships that we have with these growers, and from Chris and his dad Gary and Joe and the Hirsches and Pilgrim Vineyard, on and on and on. It's very special, at least for me, that we have these relationships, and what a wonderful job that you all have done, and just thanks to all of you watching tonight. And just to join us and be a part of this show. And thanks to this panel. Thank you for being on the show with us. So we're going to do this again in a week or so. And also behind the scenes, Allie Patterson. Allie, this is her idea to put this thing together, and what a great job she's done behind the scenes for us tonight. Big shout out to our chef, Stefano Massanti, and his wife, Rafa, who helped me shoot the videos out in the vineyard. I mean, this is a big team effort. Big shout out to Greg Quersey and his team for bottling, 3,000 of these by hand and hand labeling every bottle. And and again, thanks everyone. Great seeing all of you on the show. Can't wait to see you here at the winery. We're finally open, so you can come see us, share some wine with us. Have a great evening, and hopefully you're on board for next week. We can drink some great Zins and some Rhones. Here's to
Salute.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you.